friends, welcome back to our channel. So in the previous session we have seen the graphics class and the two other classes, that is a font class and a color class. So in today's session we will go with the event handling concept. See, before going to this event handling, first we have to know about this event. What is meant by an event? So an event is the state change. The state change, or we can also say it as a behavior change, is called as an event. Example, if you take a button, pressing on this button is an event, right? Clicking on the button is an event. If you take the text field, initially it is an empty, and if you type any letters in this text field, right, the state will be changed. Empty text will change to text field with some text. So this is also an event. So generally we can say an event as a state or a behavior change. State or a behavior change. Now the concept is how these events should be handled, right? See how we have to handle these events. For this we will follow a model called delegation event model. Delegation event model. So in this delegation event model there will be sources and there will be listeners, right? So sources are from which the events will be generated. The sources from which the events will be generated, and listeners are used to handle the events, right? So from the sources events will be generated, and whatever the events generated by the sources, that will be handled by the listeners. Now, so there are different sources which will generate these events, like button, checkbox, list, menu item, choice, scroll bar, text component, window, right? So these are the some sources which generates the events. So button, if you click that button, event will be generated. If you press that button, event will be generated, right? So checkbox means, so this is it will allow the multiple selections. So initially if it is deselected, if you select any checkbox, the state or change will be changed, right? Next, list of items, menu item, drop down menu, choice, so it's a radio buttons, okay, a single selection, scroll bar, we know that the scroll bar, if the text is greater than the component, automatically the scroll bar will be added. Text component, similarly text field and text area, and a window. So whatever the container we are using for this components, that we can call it as a window, right? So from these sources events will be generated, and first whenever the event is generated, those events will be sent to listeners, right? See, whenever the events generated from these sources, those events will be sent to these listeners. So there are number of listeners, right? There are number of listeners. So these events will be handled by these listeners. So these listeners are interfaces, right? These listeners will be associated with interfaces. So we know that the definition of an interface. Interface is nothing but which contains the abstract methods, only the abstract methods. That means the method declaration will be there, but not the definition, right? So there are number of listeners, event listeners. We can call them as event listeners, and these events will be handled by these listeners with the help of these interfaces. Now, for handling these events, first of all, these listeners should register with these sources. Register to sources, right? So a multiple number of listeners can register to the sources. Okay, so whenever an event is generated, that particular listener will be activated, and this event will be passed on to that particular listener, so that that listener will execute or implement or handle that particular event with the help of that corresponding interfaces, right? Hope you understood. So for handling these events which are generated from the sources, first of all these listeners have to register to sources, right? So for registration, the syntax is add type listener, add type listener. So this is used to register the listener interface to the sources, right? So there are different listener interfaces. So if it is key listener, right? So this will be responsible for key events, right? So what are these key events? Key typed, key pressed, key released, right? So these are the events generated by the sources, and for implementing these events, key listener is the responsible. So that first this key listener should register with the sources. So for registration, this is the syntax. We have to write add key listener, right? So whatever the events occurred, these will be available in event class, right? So event listener class, we can call it as a. See, I will explain you one by one. First, let us see the event listeners, multiple event listeners. So this is called delegation event model. So whenever an event occurs from the sources, the corresponding event listener will be handled the event occurred, right? So that will be done by the means of listener interface. Okay, now let us see the events, different events occurred, right? Action event, adjustment event, component event, container event, focus event, item event, key event, mouse event, mouse wheel event, text event, and window event. See, all these are the different event classes. So these are all the classes. These classes are used to generate the events. Okay, so whatever the events generated by the sources that are available as a methods in this class. Now let us see action event. So this is responsible for the events generated by button, checkbox, list. Okay, sorry. Button, it's a menu item. Okay, and the list. Adjustment event is responsible for a component. Component event also responsible for a component events. Container event is also responsible for components. Focus is also responsible for components, for gaining the focus and losing the focus. So item event, it is for checkbox, choice. Key event, sorry, okay. Text component, mouse event, this is for mouse movements, mouse wheel, mouse wheel movement, again the text component, this is completely for window. So all these are the different classes which are responsible for the events generated from these sources, right? So if a button is pressed, then automatically it will comes under with action event class. So in this action event class there will be different methods, and by using those methods the interface will be implemented, right? So every class is having a separate listeners. So to handle the events of action event, we are having the interface called action listener interface. For this, adjustment listener. For this, component listener. For this, container listener. Focus listener. Item listener. Key listener. Mouse listener. Mouse motion listener. Next, mouse wheel listener, text listener, window listener, right? So for all these classes, the corresponding listener interfaces will be there. So these are all the classes, these are all the events, these are all the interfaces, right? So don't get confused. So these are the events generated from the event sources, and if once the events are generated, those events are handled with the help of corresponding class and the interface. The class and interface. With the help of both the classes and interfaces, these events will be get handled. Okay, so for handling those events, first the interfaces should register with the sources, right? Hope you understood. And now we will see the methods available in these interfaces. So we know that the concept of interface, that is, interface will have only the abstract methods, that means only the method declaration but not the definition, and whatever the class we are implementing that interface, in that class we have to write the definition for all the abstract methods, right? Now let us see the methods available in interfaces. First, action listener. So in this interface, there is only one method available, that is called action performed. See, again, just recall the naming conventions. So it is an interface and it is the method. So while giving a name to the method, the first character of the first word should be small and the first character of the corresponding words should be capital. So A small and a P capital. Next. So this is the only method available in action listener. Adjustment listener. So what about the adjustment listener? Here also only one thing. Adjustment value change. So this is the only method available for adjustment listener. Component listener. So this is having 4 methods. So component resized, component resized, component moved, component moved, component shown, component hidden. So these are the 4 methods available in component listener, right? So component is nothing but our buttons, text fields, scroll bars, all these are the components, right? So that component, if you want to resize the button, then these method should be implemented. And component moved, we can place the component anywhere in the applet or anywhere in the frame, right? So shown, so we can set it as a visible or we can hide it. So these are the methods available in component listener. Next, container listener. Container listener. So container means just like our applet, right? So a small window is available. So that applet we can call it as a container. In that applet we have to create a button or a text field or checkbox or radio button, everything. So all these are the components. We can call them as components, and we can call this as container. So only two methods available in this container listener, that is component added, component removed, component added and a component removed, right? Only two methods. Focus listener. Focus listener. Focus listener means we can observe that a focus can be gained or loosed. Okay. So if you are working with multiple windows or multiple folders, you can observe this change. That means what is meant by the focus gained and focus lost. See, that is only two methods are available here. Focus gained, focus lost. Two methods, right? So if the focus is gained, we have to write that code in this method, and if the focus is lost, we have to write the code in this method, second method. Item listener. Only one method is there. Item state changed. Item state changed. Item means just we can call it as a let us say radio buttons, right? Initially, if it is a deselected, if you select this one, automatically we have to write the code in item state change. So the only one method is available for item state change. Key listener. Key listener. Key means our keyboard keys. So there are three methods. One is key typed. So whenever you type the key pressed. Similarly, key released. Right? So these are the three methods available in this key listener interface. So all these are the interfaces, right? So we have to write the code in these methods. If there is an event occurred from button, we have to use this action perform. That means we have to write the logic in action perform. So what should be happened if you click on that button, right? If any value changes, state change, you have to go with the item state change. If you press a key listener will be activated, and we have to write that code in this methods: key typed, key pressed, and key released. Okay, so these are all about the interfaces. We'll go with the another interface. Mouse listener. Mouse listener. So this is completely with the mouse movements. Okay, so mouse pressed, mouse clicked, mouse entered, mouse exited, right? Mouse released. So all these comes under the mouse listener. Okay, mouse movements, all these are the mouse movements. So there is one more listener for the mouse movements, that is mouse motion listener. Mouse motion listener, right? So it will handle the two methods, that is mouse moved mouse dragged, moving and dragging, right? So these are the mouse motion listeners. Next, mouse wheel listener. When the mouse wheel is moved, then automatically this listener should be active. So only one method, mouse wheel moved. Mouse wheel moved. Whenever the mouse wheel is moved, automatically this event will be activated. Right. Next, text listener. Only one method, that is text change. So whenever we want to change the text, automatically this text listener will be implemented. Now, window listener. Window listener. See, window activated, window deactivated. Right? So two methods. Next, window opened, window closed, window closing, window iconified, window de-iconified. Right? So these are all the different methods available in window listener. Okay, so these are all about the listener interfaces. Okay, so first we have learned regarding the event sources from which the events are generated, and once the events are generated, those events will be sent to the listeners. So the listeners have to register with the sources, so that once an event is generated, then that notification will be sent to all the listeners, and the corresponding listener will activate and it will handle the event which is generated. And how these events are handled? By means of the event classes and the interfaces. So each and every event class, there is a corresponding listener interfaces. Right? So those listener interfaces are having a different methods, and if you are implementing this listener interface, automatically we have to implement the abstract methods which are available in that listener interface. So these are all about the event handling, right? So event sources, event classes, event listeners and listener interfaces, and the abstract methods available in interfaces, listener interfaces, right? And so we can just follow a template while implementing this event handling. First we have to one thing. So all the events are available in java.util. Event handling, right? So in this package, all these events will be there. Then, so we can follow the template while implementing this event handling, right? So first we have to import the packages, and then we have to write the applet code. So because we are creating the applet, and we are using the applet viewer tool for executing these applet programs, so we are supposed to write the applet code, and then we know that whatever the class we are writing, that is an derived class of applet. So extends the applet, we have to write the extends the applet, and whatever the possible events it may occur in the applet, we have to add those interfaces. So after extending the applet, we have to implement the interfaces also. And after implementing the interfaces, first we have to register these events with sources. So for that we have seen the statement that add type listener. So by using that one we have to write it. And whatever the event is generated, that corresponding event listener should be activated, and whatever the methods we are whatever the methods available in that particular interface, we have to write all those methods. So that means we have to write the definition for all those methods. Okay, so don't get confused. So let us stop here. This is just an introduction and the overview of the event handling. So in the next session we will see a program running or handling these events. So we will see mouse events, so how the mouse events are handled, and some key events, okay, keyboard events, so how these keyboard events are handled, so that your doubts will be clarified. Okay, don't get confused here. So let us stop here. So if you really understood my sessions, like my sessions, share my sessions with your friends, and if you are having any doubts regarding this event handling, feel free to post your doubts in the comment section, so that definitely I will try to clarify all your doubts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Keep following our channel. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.